there was a critical mass. Now I have to declare an interest because I do often go to critical mass. I think it's the most wonderful celebration of cycling, and I love feeling safe amongst all these hundreds of cyclists. But on the 27th of July, there was a critical mass ride at which the Met imposed a section 12 which banned all of the cyclists from going north of the river. Now, can you explain to me why that was thought proportionate?
Jenny, I can't. I have written to you a letter to you because you wrote a letter into the Commission. I wrote about, you will be aware that a number of people were arrested on that particular evening. A number of people have been charged with offences. Those offences have still to be heard. They still have to go before a court. So that is all sub judice, and it would be inappropriate for me here to explain what clearly will be part of the evidence that will be given in those cases. 8 people have been charged recently. What I will say, and we said it all the way along, we understood the importance of people's right to protest. It's a fundamental part of our democracy, but it was a conditional right. It is a conditional right. You have to do it lawfully and you have to do it peacefully. And what we sought to do all the way through, and I think we did very, very effectively, Bob Broadhurst and the team, very effectively with the protest liaison teams, is we sought to engage with those who wanted to protest so that they could have their protest, but equally, those who were going to the games, the athletes who had trained for 4 years for their once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to compete against other athletes, or those who were carrying the torch had the chance to run, those people were not disrupted. So we sought to try and achieve that balance between the two, recognising people's right to protest, but also recognising other people's right to go about their daily business.
I think perhaps banning people from the whole of North London. I mean, for some people, North London is their only existence. And then there were also bail restrictions, which were, well, one Islington councillor, who's also a criminal defence lawyer, I presume Labour, called the restrictions draconian, onerous and unlawful.
Well, they are part of what will be heard through the judicial process. So I can't talk about the section 12 that I gave, Jenny.
No, as you felt free to explain why it was important to impose some restrictions, I'm just calling you to account at some point for these restrictions, which I think were absolutely ludicrous.
Jenny, I would say, in answer to that, Jenny, I would say we put on what we felt was appropriate and proportionate conditions, and you will be aware that there were a number of people who had indicated or shown through previous behaviour that they were willing to disrupt the games. So we sought through a judicial process and got them antisocial behaviour orders with certain conditions against those individuals. So again, we sought to use a fair and proportionate judicial process to ensure that the right conditions were put on those individuals who had shown themselves willing to disrupt the games. Because, you know, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the 10.8 million people who wanted to see the games and for the athletes to compete. Although you have a right to protest, you don't have a right to stop people competing.
As you insist on explaining why it was proportionate, even though you're saying it's sub judice, I have to ask you, do you really think it was appropriate to handcuff and arrest a 13-year-old?
I don't know anything about that particular
case.
So that's
sub judice as well?
I don't know anything about that particular case, Jenny. But
well, can you tell me the justification for kettling 182 cyclists?
Jenny, you know that is part of the matter that will be heard at court.
In that case, can you explain why a police officer told a woman cyclist that cycling was actually a crime? She said to him, cycling isn't a crime. He said, yes, it is. Can you explain
Jenny, I can't answer that question because I don't know about that particular interaction.
Boris Johnson.
Some of us would like to, but we don't have the powers. I think that this is a case where the Met completely overstepped the mark, and I will be persisting with this because civil liberties are about being able to exercise free will, and I would have thought even the Tories would have supported this. And I think that the restrictions imposed, both the Section 12 restrictions and the bail restrictions, were absolutely onerous, and the Met completely panicked on this occasion. So I will be bringing this up again.
Jenny, all I would say is I'd see it from a completely different position. I think the position that we took was we put in place proportionate and necessary conditions, and we sought to work very hard with the protester community. We did do so, which is why there were protests on a daily basis. Large numbers of them took place across the whole of the capital. There was no impact upon the Olympics, and those people were still allowed to protest.
All right then. as you persist in justifying
I'm
what
not
you've
persisting,
done,
Jenny. You
no, you
are.
are persisting, which makes me want to actually challenge you more. For example, there was a taxi protest. Now, I completely understand why the taxis did their protest. They used Zill lanes. The police did not do anything about that. Now, why did you treat cyclists differently from taxi drivers?
That's wrong, Jenny. Actually, we did take action against the
I have a complaint from the taxi driver about that.
and policed both of those demonstrations by the taxi people, and made there was one arrest made of an individual who was blocking the highway.
Have you actually charged any taxi drivers? I'm not saying you should. But have you charged any taxi drivers?
I believe the individual who jumped into the Thames, one of the taxi drivers, was charged with an offence. Yes.
I didn't know about that.
Okay.